Selamat pagi. Before we
Recording
start
in
the session,
progress.
I just want to highlight a few housekeeping rules. This dialogue will be presented in both English and Indonesian, so at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see an interpretation button. If you require this service, please click on the button, select your preferred language, and remember to click Done so that it is activated. And as this session is a webinar, viewers won't be able to turn on their camera or microphone. So if you have a question for a panelist, there is a Q&A box which you can type your question into. This event is also being live streamed on YouTube through our channel at IA-CEPA ICP Katalis. Selamat datang di acara Dialog Bisnis Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement IA-CEPA yang diselenggarakan oleh Katalis bekerja sama dengan Badan Perencanaan Pembangunan Nasional Bappenas dan Departemen Luar Negeri dan Perdagangan Australia DFAT.
Good morning. Welcome to Catalys's Business Dialogue, where we'll discuss more about the Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or IA-CEPA. Today's event is a collaboration between the Indonesian National Planning Agency, Bappenas, the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT, and Katalis.
Nah, mungkin belum banyak yang tahu nih tentang Katalis, Mbak Clarice. Jadi, sebelum kita mulai acaranya, kita akan mulai dengan sedikit perkenalan dulu. Nama saya Riandi Laksono, ekonom perdagangan dan investasi di Katalis.
Dan saya Clarice Campbell, penasihat utama untuk bidang keterampilan di Katalis.
Sedikit cerita tentang Katalis. Katalis ini diresmikan pada pertemuan tingkat Menteri Ekonomi, Perdagangan, dan Investasi Indonesia-Australia pada tanggal 6 Juli 2021. Berkantor di Jakarta, Katalis mendukung implementasi IA-CEPA dalam 4 sektor prioritas. Pertama, agri-food, kedua, advanced manufacturing, ketiga, services, dan keempat adalah skills development. Dalam menjalankan aktivitasnya, program ini bekerja secara erat dengan komunitas bisnis, baik di Indonesia maupun Australia, untuk mengkatalisasi kemitraan komersial bilateral, mengatasi regulasi perdagangan, serta berinvestasi dalam peningkatan keterampilan tenaga kerja dan perusahaan.
Katalis was formally launched at the Economic, Trade and Investment Ministerial Meeting, or ETIM, on the 6th of July 2021 to support IA-CEPA implementation in agri-food, advanced manufacturing, services, and skills. In delivering its activity, the program works closely with the business community in both Indonesia and Australia to catalyse new bilateral commercial partnerships, address trade regulations, and invest in upskilling workforces and companies.
Nah, pagi ini sudah bersama kita Ibu Amalia Adininggar Widyasanti, Deputi Bidang Ekonomi Bappenas, Mr. Todd Dias, Acting Minister Counselor for Economic Investment and Infrastructure, Kedutaan Besar Australia di Jakarta. Kami juga berterima kasih atas kehadiran para panelis, yaitu Bapak Paul Bartlett, Director dari Katalis, Bapak Profesor Andrew McIntyre, Pro Vice Chancellor dan Presiden Monash University in Indonesia, Ibu Raden Roro Widyasati Listiowulan, VP Public Policy, Government Relation, and CSR Traveloka, Bapak Toto Nugroho Pranatiasto, CEO Indonesia Battery Corporation, dan juga Ibu Susan Jenkins, CEO Ironbark Citrus. Terima kasih kepada para panelis, para peserta dialog online ini. Kami mengundang pertanyaan dan komentar Anda melalui Q&A box.
We're joined today by prominent leaders across the government, business, and academic communities from both Indonesia and Australia. We have with us Ibu Amalia Adiningrar Widyasanti, Deputy of Economic Affairs at Bappenas, and Mr. Todd Dias, Acting Minister Counselor, Economic, Investment and Infrastructure at the Australian Embassy in Jakarta. We also welcome our distinguished panellists, Bapak Paul Bartlett, Director of Katalis, Professor Andrew McIntyre, Pro Vice Chancellor and President at Monash University, Indonesia, Ibu Raden Roro Widyasari Listiowulan, Vice President of Public Policy, Government Relations and CSR at Traveloka, Bapak Toto Nugroho Pranatiasto, CEO of the Indonesian Battery Corporation, and Ibu Susan Jenkins, CEO of Ironbark Citrus. Thank you for those who have joined us online. We'd love to hear your comments in the chat. Dan sekarang, mari kita mulai dengan mendengarkan sambutan dari Menteri Perencanaan Pembangunan Nasional yang terhormat Bapak Dr. Suharto Monoarfa, diikuti oleh sambutan dari Menteri Perdagangan, Pariwisata dan Investasi Australia yang terhormat Dan Tien MP.
Let's now listen to special remarks from the Minister of National Development Planning of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Dr. Suharto Monoarfa, and then to be followed by special remarks from the Australian Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, the Honourable Dan Tien MP.
Greeting from Indonesia. I do hope all of you are in a good health. Indonesia believes by celebrating her 100 years of Independence Day will bring the year 2045 vision down to reality to be the 5th largest economy in the world. Indonesia believes a strong collaboration with other countries and deep participation in the global value chains is an effort to achieve this 2045 vision. The Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, IA-CEPA, has been ratified in February last year. The beauty of this agreement is a commitment to establish the economic cooperation program to ensure maximum utilization and bring mutual benefit of IA-CEPA for both parties. The IA-CEPA ECP will brand it just simply as Katalis. Proudly to announce to everyone, Indonesia and Australia have signed the Katalis subsidiary arrangement on Friday, 25th of June 2021. The launching of Katalis was commenced at the first Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement Economic Trade and Investment Minister meeting on July 6, 2021. By consequences, the catalyst is expected to bring both countries to have greater market access, more integrated markets, and enhanced skills, particularly in the areas of food, manufacturing, and services sectors. Therefore, we strongly encourage all relevant parties, including the government, private sectors, and academia, to take precious opportunities provided by Katalis, which are trusted advice, local networks, market insight, and skill development for any stakeholder. Indonesia welcomes this new milestone for a promising future of Indonesia-Australia's deeper economic partnership, and it is also an outstanding platform for Indonesia-Australia to pursue reciprocal economic growth and prosperity. We are building a stronger Indonesia and Australia and creating a more prosperous region. Indonesia and Australia have to work together to build back better and lead the world to engage with the new normal after the outbreak of pandemic. With this, Indonesia welcomes the new era of partnership to realize the mutual interest and complementary strengths of both nations, Indonesia and Australia. I do thank you. Stay safe and healthy.
The Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement supports Australia's and Indonesia's shared interest in a secure and prosperous region. The Australian Government has provided $40 million to support the Katalis program. Katalis has been designed to help grow partnerships between Australian and Indonesian businesses that generate growth and prosperity. It will do this by supporting trade and investment, improving market access and promoting inclusive growth for the mutual benefit of Indonesia and Australia. This program is the first of its kind in a bilateral free trade agreement, and it demonstrates Australia's commitment to maximising the benefits of our agreement. Catalyse will support deeper partnerships to boost our bilateral trade and investment. I am very pleased to see this program officially commence, and I look forward to seeing how it delivers benefits for Indonesia and Australia. I encourage businesses in both of our great nations to take advantage of the opportunities Katalis will provide. This project represents another step towards closer economic partnership between Indonesian and Australian industry.
We would like to thank the Minister of National Development Planning of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Dr. Suharto Monoarfa, and the Australian Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, the Honourable Dan Tehan MP, for the opportunity and support. Now, before we start the discussion, we will take a group photo. So I'd like to ask all of the panellists to turn on their camera and smile as we take a screenshot.
Nah, sebelum kita masuk diskusi, yuk kita berfoto dulu sejenak. Ini kesempatan langka dan baik untuk berfoto bersama para panelis yang terhormat. Pengambilan foto akan dilakukan 2 kali ya. Mohon panitia untuk menampilkan screen-nya. Ayo bergaya sebaik mungkin. Alright, saya hitung ya. 1, 2, 3. One more, different style. Different finger if you like. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you.
Great. Okay, so we're going to jump straight into the panel discussion now. If you have a question for a panelist, we ask that you put it in the chat and we will get to your question at the end of the panel discussion. So our first speaker is Ibu Amalia Adiningrat Widyasanti, or Ibu Winnie. She is the Deputy for Economic Affairs at the Indonesian Ministry of National Development Planning, or Bappenas. Ibu Winnie holds a PhD from the University of Melbourne, and she has also held various posts within Bappenas, including as expert staff and advisor for the Minister for Economic and Financing Synergy. Now, Bu, I have 2 questions for you. So my first question is, how does IA-CEPA fit into Indonesia's post-pandemic economic recovery? And my second question is, what are the government of Indonesia's expectations of the Catalyse program? Over to you, Bu.
Thank you for the question. I think, first of all, I would like to congratulate and welcome all participants to the event. And I would like to say that IA-CEPA really fit into Indonesia's post-pandemic economic recovery. And because, as you know, that Indonesia has a vision to become a high-income economy by 2045. And of course, we are trying to also pursue equal development between the west and eastern part of Indonesia, as well as environmental and the aspects. In order to achieve this vision, India is now redesigning a new economic transformation post-COVID-19, and this IA-CEPA will fit very well to support the Indonesian economic transformation in the context of escaping from the middle income trap by 2045. As you know, the Indonesian economy was impacted a lot by the pandemic, and Indonesian economy was contracted by 2.1% in 2020 and resulted in temporary and permanent layoff of workers and increase of unemployment. In the recovery period of post-COVID-19 pandemic, Indonesia requires a strong economic recovery coupled with economic transformation that will bring the Indonesian economy not only back to its pre-crisis condition, but also to a much better condition before the crisis. And this, we have to pursue a more productive economy, sustainable and inclusive economy. And this is actually carried out by Indonesia's economic transformation. For your information, ladies and gentlemen, the Indonesian economic transformation include increasing human resources and also improve economic productivity, green economy, digital transformation, and the integration of Indonesian domestic economy. For sure, trade and investment are the main prime mover of Indonesia's recovery. The IA-CEPA, which has a comprehensive range of commitments covering trade in goods and services, investment and economic cooperation, I believe that IA-CEPA Katalis specifically can support the economic recovery and transformation. Indonesia and Australia should work together to take this opportunity post-COVID-19 to recover together and to increase resilience and growth of both countries. Should I continue to the next answer of the questions?
Boleh, Bu.
Yeah. So what is our government expectation on catalyst? So through the IA-CEPA catalyst, we are really expecting that there will be an improvement on productivity and quality of human resources. As you know, that IA-CEPA catalyst will support reskilling and upskilling of human resources. The IA-CEPA catalyst, of course, can also encourage opportunities to strengthen the Indonesian labor market to compete not only in the domestic market, but also in the international market. Besides that, IA-CEPA catalyst is expected to assist in terms of innovation and technology, including for agriculture and manufacturing sector, such as through the cooperation in capacity building, research, and innovation. Furthermore, Indonesia and Australia also agree to collaborate by creating an economic powerhouse, which is a concept that utilizes each country's advantages to target the international market, the third world market countries and region. So Indonesia and Australia can work together as a basis of production. With this powerhouse collaboration, Indonesia expects to participate more in the global value chain through a value-added process and transformation to support a complete economic recovery. As you know, that IA-CEPA catalyst will present a lot of opportunities. Indonesia is really hope that this could be a good stepping stone for both countries to expand our businesses, boost the economic growth, again, by active participation, valuable contribution, and strong collaboration of all stakeholders to the program. It will be very essential to ensure that the implementation of IA-CEPA can really give a lot of benefit for both countries. So again, I would like to underline that it is very mandatory that active participation, valuable contribution, and strong collaboration from all stakeholders is a very beneficial and very much important to have the Katalis program be successful. So last but not least, through IA-CEPA, both Indonesia and Australia can grow together in a direction to a prosperous nations and peaceful neighbors. Thank you very much. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Bu Winnie, for those excellent remarks. And it is very encouraging to hear how Indonesia will progress further in post-pandemic era and how IA-CEPA fit into that process. Thank you, Bu Winnie. Let's discuss more in the Q&A session after this session. Next, I'd now like to introduce Mr. Todd Dias, who is the head of Economic Investment and Infrastructure branch at the Australian Embassy in Jakarta, the branch which oversees Katalis. He was a member of Australia's IA-CEPA negotiating team, having also worked on a number of other trade agreements in the past. He is a long-standing friend of Indonesia, having spent more than 6 years living in Indonesia. Pak Todd, our question to you today is that in the context of the comprehensive strategic partnership between Indonesia and Australia, in the enhancement of economic and development partnership is high on the list of priority pillars. What are some of the expectations from Canberra as to where the IA-CEPA will take us? And relatedly, how do you see the role of Katalis in mapping the opportunities and challenges for post-pandemic economic recovery? The screen is yours, Pak Todd.
Terima kasih banyak Pak Riyandi. Selamat pagi and selamat siang bagi teman-teman yang ada di Australia. I'll continue in English, but it's a real pleasure to be here. And as Pat Riyandi said, I was involved in the negotiations, so I'm even happier to now be involved in the implementation as well. So Pat Riyandi, to your first question about hopes and expectations for IA-CEPA, they're very high. But as Ibu Winnie just mentioned before, it's all about that word opportunity and how we can create opportunity. So I think everybody knows that Indonesia and Australia are the two largest economies in the region. But we don't want to just buy and sell stuff to each other. We really think that the relationship can be much bigger than that. And IA-CEPA really will encourage closer economic cooperation and integration, which I think you've seen in the videos before from Katalis about how market integration is one of those key outcomes. But there are three key areas that I wanted to quickly touch on today. The first is that powerhouse concept that Ibu Winnie was talking about earlier. We've heard stories before about how Australia sends high quality wheat to Indonesia, it gets processed, made into noodles. People eat noodles in Indonesia, but it's also exported to many countries around the world, including back to Australia. But there are other examples of this kind of powerhouse model. Iron ore, for example, being used to create steel in Indonesia, cotton to make clothing. And I'll come back to another example when I answer your second question, Pat Riyandi. But as I said, it's not just about buying and selling things to each other. The investment element is also really, really important because investment is a long-term commitment. So companies are spending a lot of money, putting a lot of time and effort. So they want to make sure that there is a payoff. And that massive investment is what creates the kind of long-standing glue, for want of a better word, that will help bind us together and enhance our economic partnership and our bilateral economic ties. And that third element I wanted to talk about is the people-to-people links, and that fits in with the skills agenda that is part of the broader Katalis program. As you've mentioned, Pat Riyandi, I've had a long history in Indonesia, and there are many people in the Australian Embassy who have studied in Indonesia before, including our ambassador at the moment. And so I really do strongly believe that having more people-to-people engagement will help to create that bigger I guess, economic opportunity for us, but also increase understanding between our two countries. I'm not just talking here in terms of tourists going each way, but also the students as well. We talk a lot about students going to Australia. I actually think there are real opportunities for students and other workers, particularly those early on in their career, to come to Indonesia and have some time in Indonesia to develop their own skills, but also an appreciation and understanding of how Indonesia works, our biggest neighbour. And I'm really excited about some of those transnational education opportunities that I know we're about to hear later on in this webinar. So all of this takes time and effort, and I know that, IA-CEPA is not going to be the silver bullet, but it does create that framework for allowing all of these things to happen. It creates that opportunity for companies, organizations, and individuals indeed, to help participate in building that stronger relationship and making sure that we can increase our trade, investment, and people-to-people links as we integrate, not just for our bilateral relationship, but also for those third market opportunities. Now, in terms of your second question, how do I see the role of Katalis in terms of mapping out opportunities? Well, look, as you mentioned, Bappenas, I was a negotiator in the IA-CEPA negotiations on the Australian team. And we always seek advice before we start, and in fact, during our negotiations as well, from a broad range of stakeholders, including the business community, civil society organisations, and indeed individuals who want to provide input. And we take that advice on board, and we have that in the back of our mind when we negotiate the outcomes in any kind of economic partnership agreement, including IA-CEPA, to make sure that we are meeting those key criteria that have been set out in terms of what are the milestones that we want to achieve. But one of the reasons I think Catalyst is just really exciting is because the world is constantly changing, and the opportunities that we identified and responded to when we were doing the negotiations will also change as we go further into time. And I can give you a really good example of that. When we were negotiating IA-CEPA, we were thinking, well, look, electric vehicles are a thing of the future. It's where we're headed. Indonesia has a whole lot of nickel and other minerals, got a whole lot of people to make batteries, and Australia's got lithium. So maybe this is a great opportunity for us to have one of those powerhouse partnerships that I talked about earlier. And I know that Katalis is doing a lot of work at the moment mapping out how we can do that with an Indonesia-Australia partnership. And I'm confident that that will actually indicate that there's more to it than just selling lithium or integrating nickel, but a whole suite of services, design elements, things like how you charge cars and electric vehicles. And to me, that's the kind of area that perhaps we didn't think about when we were doing the negotiations, but it is an area that we can take advantage of through IA-CEPA and through Katalis, because of course what we've done is we've reduced, in fact Australia's removed all tariffs for trade from Indonesia for imports. We've created some really good rules of origin, which I know most people don't understand, but if you're a goods trader, you'll appreciate. And we've created that additional certainty for our service suppliers and investors. So this kind of activity that Katalis is doing, not just in terms of electric vehicles and batteries, but across those 4 core areas that were mentioned earlier in the video, I think are really exciting for us to be able to see how we can get future opportunities, stuff that we haven't even thought of. A great example of that as well is in the skills area. We know that Australia has really good vocational trainers who link their courses specifically to what industry and indeed private sector want from their employees. And the question then is, well, having created this opportunity in IA-CEPA, how do we help to match those Australian suppliers to Indonesian businesses and industry so that we can replicate that here? And I'm really looking forward to that concept being explored and developed and implemented through Katalis, through the clearinghouse process. So as I said, there's lots of these opportunities, but really it comes down to flexibility. And Katalis is a new style of program for us. We've never had this before in any of our other economic partnership agreements. And I think there are amazing opportunities. But of course, I'm a government official. What we really want to hear is what do business people and other stakeholders want from IA-CEPA, and how can we help? How can we as governments help them deliver that? And Katalis is the perfect vehicle for making that happen. So I really look forward to as many people as possible coming up with terrific ideas that we can explore together to make sure that we get the most out of IA-CEPA and really build that strong bilateral relationship that will serve us in good stead through our region as we take advantage of all of those opportunities that are out there. Thanks very much, Bappenas. I'll pass back to you and Clarice.
Thanks, Todd, for those comments. It's always really interesting to hear what the embassy and the wider DFAT community is expecting from the program. And I really appreciate your emphasis on skills, being the lead advisor for skills. So hopefully we can find some really great opportunities there. So now to hear directly from Katalis, I'd like to introduce Mr. Paul Bartlett. He is the Director of Katalis, where he heads the Business Development Program aimed to catalyse economic partnership between Australia and Indonesia. Paul has significant experience advising on private sector development, trade, investment and competitiveness in Indonesia and previously throughout the Asia-Pacific, Africa, the Middle East and Europe. So Paul, I can see we have a number of questions in the Q&A box, which we'll get to later, but your response might answer some of them. And for anybody watching, please continue to post questions in the Q&A box. But I think a number of people are wondering, how does Catalyse work? And for those viewers who have done their homework and ventured onto the website, they will have seen that there are some investment criteria. So can you also tell us what they are?
Right, thanks very much, Clarice. Good morning, everybody. Salamat pagi semua. To answer your first question, I'd just like to make 4 quick points. First, Katalis is explicitly linked to IA-CEPA, as has been made clear by Pak Todd and Ibu Winnie earlier. And as such, our goal is to ensure the benefits of IA-CEPA are maximised. This includes ensuring that IA-CEPA is implemented effectively, including through delivering on commitments to open up the 2 markets and supporting inclusive economic growth. Second, Katalis works with the support and guidance of the Indonesian and Australian governments, represented today by Ibu Winnie and Pak Todd. The 2 governments provide overall direction to Katalis and approve all of our activities, either through an annual planning process or, if the activity is urgent, through out-of-session approval. Third, and this was just mentioned by Pak Todd, while the 2 governments guide the overall direction of travel, Katalis is a business-centred programme. We really are looking to the business community to provide ideas and solutions to the challenge of increasing bilateral trade and investment. In practice, of course, that means that we both approach business and need to be responsive to it. This means having the ability to listen to businesses and act as a gateway for their input. As a business, if a business organisation or other organisation has a genuine business proposal or idea to increase bilateral trade and investment, we'd like to hear from you. To this end, we have integrated a business portal into our website so that businesses can contact us directly with their ideas. And I would encourage any businesses listening today to take a look at this and to pay close attention to our investment criteria. The 4th and final point I'd like to emphasise is that the programme is still delivering ODA, Overseas Development Assistance, or aid. As such, our investment criteria reflect a combination of both commercially focused objectives and development focused objectives. We see these investment criteria as mutually reinforcing, and it is this interaction of these investment criteria that makes Katalis work and makes Katalis unique. So I might just skip on to the investment criteria. I think there's a slide up on the screen. So in short, we have 7 key investment criteria. The first of which is to maximise the outcomes from IA-CEPA. And in this, we're really looking at commercial outcomes. Some of the considerations would be here, what is the return on investment of the activity? Or what is the business case for the activity? The second investment criterion refers to financial or in-kind co-contribution from the beneficiary or from the beneficiaries. We think this is critical, actually. It increases ownership of the activity. It ensures the activity is a real partnership between the business, the beneficiary, and Katalis, and improves the likelihood that the activity will deliver sustainable outcomes. The third area that we are looking at is that obviously the activity needs to be mutually beneficial to Indonesia and Australia, and preferably aligned with bilateral and or regional interests. So here we'd be looking for win-win bilateral commercial opportunities. We'd be looking to see if the direct and indirect beneficiaries are in Indonesia or Australia. We would also be looking at the broader economic, social, and public benefits, if any, which are expected beyond the commercial outcomes identified. Essentially, with the bilateral and regional interests, we will be looking to see if there's a link to third markets. This picks up the idea of IA-CEPA delivering powerhouse opportunities, as elaborated by both Ibu Winnie and Pak Todd, whereby the imports of one partner are used to strengthen the export competitiveness of the other partner. Fourth, we are looking for catalytic outcomes. Some considerations here would be, is the activity scalable? Does it crowd in other investors or traders from the sector or from related value chains? Fifth, we are looking to see if the activity delivers gender equity and social inclusion. Does the activity target, include, or make a positive impact on women, people with disabilities, or other marginalized groups, particularly in sectors heavily affected by COVID-19? Almost there, so politically feasible and practical is our sixth investment criterion. Is the activity dependent upon large policy or regulatory reform under IA-CEPA? And if so, is the change politically feasible or practical? And last but not least, we would be looking to see if activities reflect Indonesia's and Australia's comparative advantages. And here we'd be looking at the human, industrial, commercial, organizational, management, and institutional resources being applied to the activity from each country. Thanks, Clarice and Riandi. I think that answers some of the questions that have been put into the chat box, but of course, happy to discuss further later during the Q&A. Back to you.
Thank you, Pak Paul. It's great to hear more details about Katalis directly from Pak Paul. It is interesting to learn that Katalis aims to achieve not only commercial objectives, but also aims to improve broader development goals of Indonesia. So stay tuned for the Q&A session for further discussion with Pak Paul. All right. Our next speaker is Bapak Toto Nugroho Pranatiasto. He is the CEO of Indonesia Battery Corporation. He previously held the role of Managing Director of Pertamina Energy Services, the trading arm of Pertamina, based in Singapore. He was also the President Director of PT Pertagas. Selamat pagi, Pak Toto.
Right.
We have two related questions for you today, Pak Toto. We understand that the government has announced a target of May 2022 to commence the first phase for manufacturing of electric cars and battery cells. Could you share with us how is that plan going so far? And secondly, the IA-CEPA provides excellent opportunities for strengthening Indonesia's capacity for manufacturing electric vehicles and batteries. What kind of partnership do you envision with Australia? The screen is yours, Pak Toto.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for having us from Katalis. I just need to introduce a little bit about IBC. IBC is an Indonesian Battery Corporation where we are actually owned by 4 state-owned entities that covers from mining, from PLN also, and Pertamina. We are at this moment, to answer your question, that first of all, the government target is the 30% conversion of all electric vehicles in 2030. So that's equivalent to around 600,000 four wheels and about close to almost 2 million four wheels EV. So let's see the supply demand, slide number 2, please. Yang kedua. Okay, so this is what is targeted by the government in terms of the electric vehicles, both in the passenger cars and the motorcycle. And as you can see that this is a rapid growth where we really need to have all the resources in Indonesia and all the stakeholders to be aligned. Next slide. Just giving you a brief overview of the Indonesian Battery Corporation, that we really want to be a world-class global EV player for market regionally and globally. Why we aspire to have this high aspiration is because, as you know, Indonesia has one of the largest deposits of nickel and the other resources that is needed to create batteries for EV and for the batteries electrical support system, the ESS. Next slide. This is the term of the business model that we are currently engaging. As you can see that we have the, in terms of the battery, we have an integrated approach on creating the battery in Indonesia, where we have the activities from the mining side, refining, precursors, and battery cells. And eventually we also go into the battery recycling business, where this is very good sustainability for the batteries that we produce in Indonesia. We also will have the mandate of driving the ecosystem. So we're not just doing batteries. We are driving the 4-wheels and 2-wheel business in Indonesia, where we call it on the right side there, the string of pearls, where there are certain engagement that we do. As you can see, example, we have already in Indonesia, the state-owned enterprise production of cassettes, the Indonesian electric vehicle for motorcycle. So these are the business space that we are looking at, and hopefully by showing this kind of strategic aim that we currently are doing from Indonesia and the government, we can see what is the possible collaboration with Australia in this case from the IA-CEPA, CPA. Next slide. One thing that I need to share with you that in doing the development of the batteries, this is something of a big magnitude of investment. As you can see, we need to invest close to 15.3 billion to develop close to 140 gigawatt hours of battery production. And this goes from all the way from the mining and all the way to recycling. And as you know that this will be developed by IBC, we're creating the JV. And of course, we are owned by MineID, Antam, Pertamina, and PLN, where MineID and Antam is the mining side, and Pertamina PLN is the downstream side. And developing this engagement, as you can see, we are working with the international partners. If you can follow the news, of course, that we are currently working with Chinese and South Korean partners in developing the end-to-end value chain. Next slide. Next slide, please. Berikutnya. These are the timelines that we currently aim in terms of the strategic timeline. Again, to answer the question of where the EV space is going into the future, you can see the milestone that we are working from the battery side, that we will have the production in terms of the battery in 2024. What is very critical also that one of the advantages having the batteries in Indonesia is we are working with partners to be the not just the battery production hub for ASEAN, but the EV production hub for ASEAN. So as you know that there is investment currently from Hyundai, Korean company, to create the EV production car in Indonesia in 2022. But also, if you follow the news, just recently we had the groundbreaking of the 10 gigawatt hour. That's close to 150,000 4-wheel drives per year, which is the partnership between Hyundai, LG, and ourselves, IBC. So this is the timeline that we can see. But in terms of the targeting, the grand target for from the government is the 30% conversion of all vehicles into electric vehicles in 2030. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of the potential partnership with Australia, with IA-CEPA in this CPA, and in this case, I think one of the things which is most strategic is on the upstream side, where, as you know, in order to produce the batteries that we need for the EV, we really need to have a good amount of import of lithium. And Australia I think holds about 44% of the lithium reserve in the world. I think that's a very strategic area that we can have a look at. In terms of the other supply chain, we see that several of the battery, there are certain Australian company that has some work on the battery technology side, especially for the ESS, the energy storage system to power the renewables, and that's something that we can look also. The other one is actually because, as we mentioned before, that Indonesia is going to be an exporting hub for EV vehicles. And at this point in time, I see that Australia is currently developing the EV adoption in Australia. I think this is very strategic in terms of logistic costs to be really one of the market that we aim in terms of production of EV from Indonesia to the region, ASEAN, and also, of course, Australia. The other thing is, of course, the capacity building to improve the competency, skills, knowledge in EV batteries and EV industry ecosystem. This is a very, at this point in time, it's a very infancy stage for Indonesia to have this kind of knowledge and competencies. So basically, if you can find any area of working towards this kind of upgrading the skills, knowledge in the EV and battery and EV ecosystem, that would be something would be very beneficial for both countries. Hopefully this short talk can have answers for both of your questions. Thank you.
Wow, Pak Toto, it's really interesting to hear more details about this sector. I'm sure many on the call are just starting to learn a little bit more about it. So it's really great to see that presentation. So now moving on to a sector that's a little bit closer to home for me at least, I'd like to introduce our fifth speaker, Ibu Widiasari Listiowulan. She is the Vice President for Public Policy, Government Relations and CSR at Traveloka. Ibu Widya has more than 17 years of experience in program management, education, government affairs and corporate social responsibility strategy. And she is a public-private partnerships specialist. Welcome, Bu Widya, to today's panel session. So I have two questions for you, and I'm sure the audience would like to hear from you how Traveloka is collaborating with government and stakeholders to boost economic recovery. And secondly, local businesses are often looking for quick wins and improved workforce with enhanced skills and quality. So in what ways can they partner with Australian education and training providers? Over to you.
Thank you, Clarice. First of all, thank you so much for having us. Thank you for DFAT, Bappenas, and of course, Katalis. Congratulations for the program as well. So hopefully we can see lots of fruitful collaboration between Katalis and company like Traveloka. So with Traveloka, Clarice, we start with the online platform company, and then now we are lifestyle super app operating in 8 countries, and we have headquarters in Indonesia. So we are very ambitious in expanding our business as well as working with multiple stakeholders to ensure the economy moving forward, especially pandemic. At the moment, we work with the Ministry of Tourism to implement CHSE, which is the Cleanliness, Health, Safety and Environment Sustainability. We also work with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Tourism, government, provincial government like Yogyakarta, Bali and Tangsel, plus other state-owned enterprise company. We ensure that we support the acceleration of vaccination program. At the moment, we reach 65K people to be vaccinated, to include teachers, tourism sector players, as well as public. So other than health, we also work with the Ministry of Villages and Remote Area, Clarice, to provide training for communities on digital tourism. And we will maintain this program. And this is something that we would like to work with Katalis as well. Now on education and training program, Clarice, we currently work with the Ministry of Education as well as other big tech company like Google, Gojek, and so on and so forth for the Bangkit Academy. And this morning, actually, one of my close colleague, Pak Brian from the Ministry of Education is here, and we train lots of students with very deep tech skills that are very needed in 21st century job market. And since the beginning of the program, Traveloka very active in providing mentoring as well as facilitating the discussion with the students. I think at the moment we reach more than 5,000 students trained under this Bangkit Academy program. Now this year only, Clarice, we work with again Ministry of Education to support the initiative called Merdeka Belajar. At this initiative, we host almost more than 50 students from top university, both public and private universities in Indonesia, to work with us as intern. Now, different than the old style intern program, we actually provide them with the actual project that very close to Traveloka. With this, they can learn directly with the mentor and learn directly on the issues on the ground. So we hope that we will maintain this program. Now, for your second questions, Clarice, learning and development have been always the main culture of Traveloka as a corporation and Travelokans, the employee of Traveloka. We understand that as a business, we have to be responsible and we have to ensure that there is a kind of what you may call it, platform to ensure that there is a supply, appropriate supply, and we involve in the creating of the supply, which is the human resource for the job market. Now we understand that local businesses also play important role in Indonesia economic development. So that will be the core of our training program. Our CSR program, Clarice, as seen on the slide, the first thing is environment and the second is social. And this is something that we can work together moving forward with Australia institution because of the knowledge that Australian institutions have had, especially in related to tourism as well as technology. Now, there are three things that we would like to have in the future, in terms of collaboration. First of all, we want to hear from the expert, which is the Australian institution expert, as how to reform tech curriculum and how to provide training that is related with tourism, sustainability of tourism, because after this pandemic, we are very sure that people will start traveling. But we also know that we need to ensure the campaign on how to travel or how to do vacation with responsibility. Now, this is something that we need to do right now without waiting until the border is open. Now, the second part that we would like to explore, Clarice, is to provide consultation and supply of learning material in project-based practices. And the last one, I think, this is what I learned from the past, is we can have TOT program that we will implement in our partners. This is hotels and restaurants as well as university, on how they can create program that ensure the sustainability of tourism, number one. Number two is to ensure that there is a skill gap that will be met and that will be provided to ensure that Indonesia graduate will be able to channel their skill in technology industry as well as tourism industry. So I think that's the main area that we would like to know, Clarice. And after that, we open for question and answer. Over to you, Clarice.
Thank you, Bu Widya. Thank you very much for the insights. It is very encouraging to hear about the role that Traveloka play in economic recovery and skill development through collaboration with the government, local businesses, and potentially with Australia in the near future. Thank you, Bu Widya. Let's stay tuned for the Q&A session after this. If you still have more questions, just type in the Q&A box. Now, I'd like to introduce you with Ibu Susan Jenkins. Susan Jenkins is the CEO of Ironbark Citrus, a global exporter of premium quality fruit based in Queensland, Australia. Ironbark Citrus is an export specialist that has successfully exported fruits over the past 20 years to Indonesia, China, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, and the Middle East. Susan, our question to you today is, having exported premium mandarins to ASEAN markets, including Indonesia, in the past couple of decades, from an industry perspective, could you please share with us what has been the most pressing needs to ensure better market access? And related to that, what are your hopes for this in relation to the IA-CEPA? The screen is yours, Susan.
Thank you very much. And good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to say how honoured I am to be asked to speak today at the launch of this great joint venture between Australia and our close neighbour and friend Indonesia. It's a wonderful thing that's being initiated here. It's probably just to give a little bit of a background. We have exported to Indonesia mandarins for since 1996, and we have long-term relationships with our Indonesian importers. And Indonesia has provided some great benefits to us as a trading partner. being a close neighbour has made communications and visiting very easy, and will again, we hope, after COVID. I think that the growing population and the accelerated growth of the middle class is a real growing market for us. And the fact that Indonesians love mandarins and will take a large variety of sizes and classes. We have encountered some problems with our trade over the years, and some of these problems I really feel will be very easily ironed out with this new agreement in place. I do remember a sudden increase in tariffs to 25%, an overnight increase several years ago, which made our fruit considerably more expensive. Both expensive for us to trade and also for our customers and the eventual consumers. The introduction of import quotas made the trade more complicated and expensive and seemed to actually create a whole new industry of trade in import quotas in Indonesia. Then there was a threatened closure of access to Jakarta port, which would have impacted heavily on the time it took for our fruit to reach the consumer, and that added risks of poor quality turnout and again increased costs for everybody. The restrictions put in place for the issue of import permits for Australian mandarins effectively stopped our trade for a couple of years there, as no permits were issued for almost the whole of our harvest season. So really, we've only really been back into the market in a big way in the last season, really in the last season or two. So I suppose what I see with this agreement is that we're looking forward. We're not going to actually be encountering these sort of problems in the future. That the agreement is set up in such a way that these issues are not going to be things that are going to interrupt our trade into the future. I hope they're in the past, and I think we're looking. Indonesia was once our major customer, took 70% of our fruit, and we're very much hoping to get back into that space again and increase our trade. And I don't see any reason why that's not going to be possible in the future. On another aspect of our business, we have set up a business called Ironbark Lao, as social responsibility is actually a really key part of what we do. Where we established a business in Laos to assist the local farmers there to move from subsistence farming into economic farming by growing citrus. So using our skills and our funding to actually create a venture, what we hope is an economic venture. And it's very exciting to see in the catalyse investment opportunities there that this is something that we actually looked at. Before we actually ended up in Laos, we looked at Indonesia as a possibility. We'd been trading with Indonesia for so many years. We'd had a really positive relationship and we wanted to give something back to the country. But in the end, at that time, it was too expensive and too complicated for us to set up a similar initiative in Indonesia. And it's very exciting to see that this is now becoming much more like a possibility for companies in Australia to set up ventures like this. Yeah. I think the other things to improve trade and improve market access for people like us who are primarily, we are exporters. We don't actually supply the Australian market at all. We were set up with export in mind, and actually we were set up with Indonesia in mind back in 1991. We actually planted varieties of mandarins that specifically with Indonesia as a market in mind. So I think that things that can improve export for us is, number one, is what we are seeing with this agreement, good communications and relationships between governments. It's absolutely number one. So many issues can be easily sorted out and quickly resolved, trade issues, if there are good relationships between countries. I think non-tariff barriers in any form make trade really difficult and expensive, and the product more expensive for the consumer in the end. Certainly as exporters over in many countries in the world, too many countries in the world, we're often confronted with these sorts of barriers. I think identification and elimination of these sorts of issues are really, really important to make trade move more smoothly. I think consistent and clear application of rules around protocols, it reduces the number of people in that supply chain, and it will make trade move much more smoothly and reduce costs for your eventual consumer. And I think mutual recognition of things like quality assurance systems for us in the fruit industry, testing of fruit for chemicals and things like that. If these sorts of certifications and testings are mutually recognised, again, it reduces cost and it also makes the trade run more smoothly. I think that's probably answered more your questions, and I'm happy to answer more later on.
Great, thank you so much for those comments, Susan. It's always really interesting to hear directly from people who have had so much experience exporting their product into markets. So we really appreciate your time today. So in true Indonesian fashion, we've gone well over our allocated time, but we're going to continue to press on. So for those of you who have to drop off the line, that's absolutely no worries. But if you can stay, we would really greatly appreciate that. And I now have the pleasure to introduce our final speaker for this panel session, Professor Andrew McIntyre. He is the Pro Vice Chancellor and President at Monash University, Indonesia. In this capacity, he is responsible for establishing and leading Monash in Indonesia, the first foreign university to be established here. Andrew has served as an advisor to governments and corporations in a range of countries around the region. And so firstly, I would like to congratulate you, Andrew, for the establishment of Monash, being, it's the first foreign university to have a fully fledged physical presence here in Indonesia. So from an institutional perspective, how has the experience been, and what are some of the lessons learned for other Australian learning institutions looking to do the same? And on top of this, what are some of the important regulatory issues in terms of implementing the IA-CEPA, and how do you think Katalis can help?
Oh, well, good morning, Clarice, Riandi. Nice to be with you both and everyone else today. Clarice, as you said, Monash, first foreign university invited and then approved to establish a campus in Indonesia. We're really clear that that's a big responsibility. And we're really clear that our core mission is to make a strong contribution to the further success of Indonesia. And for the Monash campus in Jakarta, we're doing that through postgraduate training, masters, PhDs, executive education, and really high quality research. And we're very excited. We've got our first intake of students coming up very soon, starting this year with programs in data science, urban design, public policy and management, and business innovation. And we're looking next year to expand that into areas such as public health, cybersecurity, environment sustainability, creative economy, those sorts of things. Clarice, when you sort of say IA-CEPA and what is that? What's the implications of that for somebody in the education sector? In our case, higher education, but could also be vocational education. I guess there's two answers to that. For a higher education institution, there's some specific detail things around workforce, location of institution, those sorts of details. But I would say actually the biggest significance of IA-CEPA is the signal it sends about the commitment of both the Indonesian government and the Australian government to making this partnership work. It's a sort of head-turning effect. It's a signal to investors in both countries, hey, government's trying to get things moving here. And I think that signalling effect is actually the most important thing. It draws people's attention. If I think in the education sector, something that's just been hugely helpful to us is the really clear commitment of the government of Indonesia to investing in human resources, in really trying to put more energy, more creativity into the building of Indonesia's human resource capacity, with one dimension of that being foreign institutions. So I think that's been really important. If I think about specifically how Katalis can help universities like Monash or Indonesian universities, other Australian universities that are looking to partner in this new space, I would say it's around market entry. It's around understanding the regulatory environment. That's a challenge for any foreign investor, whether it's an Indonesian investor doing something in Australia or an Australian investor looking to do something in Indonesia. It's understanding the regulatory context. And that is such a big thing. There's some large macro, really big regulatory issues that you need to understand. That's essential, but it's not enough. You sort of drill down another layer and there's finer, detailed regulations, perhaps implementing regulations of one sort or another. And it's knowing what's going on at that level that I think Katalis can be of real assistance to Indonesian institutions, Australian institutions that are looking to come together. If I think specifically in higher education, in our experience, the big areas were around legal establishment, understanding what's involved, what's required there, various sorts of specific approvals needed, in our case, from Ministry of Education in particular, and from BKPM's also been an important player. And also some more detailed issues around workforce, rules around workforce. So all those sorts of things, I think Katalis can just be really helpful. If I think a bit more broadly, it would be helping, whether it's the Indonesian institution or the Australian institution, to figure out who their friends might be. Which specific people in government might be able to help with this or that problem. I've got to say, our experience has been that government of Indonesia has just been exceptionally supportive. And I don't mean by that any particular material benefits. It's just by being encouraging and by being receptive and responsive to questions and concerns that we've needed to work through. So right across government agencies, we've had just really good encouragement, really good support. Look, I think perhaps the summary point here is that I think there's a lot that Katalis can do in the education sector, whether it's higher education, vocational education, in helping Indonesian institutions and Australian institutions that are looking to partner in some way to find each other and navigate the way through the regulatory context which applies in that particular jurisdiction. I think there's really big opportunities here for Indonesian universities and for Australian universities. I know in our case, we're putting a lot of effort now into reaching out to a wide cross-section of Indonesian institutions, just exploring potential for partnerships, who's interested in doing what can we sustain. So as I say, I think big opportunities on both sides here, and an important role for Katalis to play in helping things along. But let me stop there and let's get the Q&A.
Thank you, Pak Andrew, for your insight and such an inspiring story. It's so encouraging to hear, at least for me, that Monash University in Indonesia will soon play such an important role for the development of the 21st century skills for Indonesia. You mentioned about data science, cybersecurity and stuff, cool stuff like that. That's exactly what Pak Jokowi wants in one of his speech, right? So, and we believe the future will be very bright for Indonesia and Australia. So thank you, Pak Andrew. Let's continue in the discussion. So next, we have identified some of the questions that we received through the Q&A box. We select 3 questions to be answered by the panelists. So let me start with the first question. It is from Pak Franz Iskandar, one of the Indonesian entrepreneurs. His question is that mostly small and middle scale businesses are hardly hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of unemployment as well, and mass layoff almost happening every day. How can this small business and regular workers may benefit from the IA-CEPA in one way or another, directly or indirectly? Yep, to the panelists.
Riandi, should I have a first attempt at answering that one?
No. Hard question for you, Paul.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it reflects the comments made by the opening speakers from Ibu Winnie and Pak Todd earlier as well, in the sense that we need to...
I'm sorry, Paul, can you please put your mic closer?
I see, sorry. Is that
better?
Thank
you, Paul. Yes, now it's better, Paul.
Okay, so it's a great question, and I think it also reflects the comments earlier made by Ibu Winnie and Pak Todd that we are living in the midst of a pandemic, and we need to acknowledge that the design of IA-CEPA and Katalis was all done before the pandemic, and of course we need to pivot in some way to ensure that the program responds to these challenges and is inclusive as possible. So the point I would like to make is that we're here to listen. We obviously can't engage with everybody on every single topic, but as I made reference in my comments, we do encourage small businesses, business associations, and other organizations to send in their ideas to us. So we can't possibly have all of the solutions or all of the ideas ourselves. And so the idea of Catalyst is that we are inclusive, and it means reaching out to marginalized groups, those affected by COVID, people with disabilities, women entrepreneurs, subnational businesses, and businesses that wouldn't otherwise get the opportunity to engage in a program such as this. So I'm talking about businesses in Eastern Indonesia and at the subnational level in Australia also. So we're here to listen to your ideas, and I would encourage anybody that thinks that they have an idea that meets our investment criteria to look at our website and to put in a submission to put in their idea through our business portal and to walk through the investment criteria as you do so. And for the very best ideas, which meet our investment criteria, we would then engage with those proponents of those ideas if we think that they have an opportunity or they represent value for money for the program. I hope that answers that. That's the first attempt at answering that one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Maybe let me invite Pak Todd to give some answer to the question. So how IA-CEPA will affect regular business and workers and unemployment in Indonesia?
Very much, Pat Riandi. And as Paul said, I mean, this program for Catalyst is really aimed across the board. This is not just about the big end of town. And in fact, to some extent, big companies can really look after themselves. They've got the resources to check how to use a trade agreement, to work out where their investment strategy is, and so forth. So in terms of how we help MSMEs, We have, for example, an FTA portal that's very popular in Australia, and that allows in fact, it allows everybody, but it's particularly helpful for small and medium-sized companies to type in the details of the products that they wish to trade to all of our trading partners, and gives them very clear information about the kind of tariff rules that apply, the rules of origin, and so forth. The other thing I would note is that, as Paul said, we're not going to be able to assist everybody. So really, in terms of the MSME angle, it's going to be MSMEs that are looking to engage on an international stage. And we already know that there are a large number of companies, both in Australia and Indonesia, that do that and do that successfully. And so the question then is, how do we encourage those MSMEs who are not doing that to take advantage of those opportunities? So any of those ideas that come through from business would be gratefully accepted. We'll review all of those and see where it's possible. And actually, not just MSMEs, but also think about geographic spread as well. It's one thing I forgot to mention, is that sitting here in Jakarta, it's very big and exciting. There's always lots of things going on. But Indonesia is much bigger than Jakarta, and I see we've got lots of people who've joined us today from various places around Indonesia, just as we've got people joining us from various places in Australia. So I'm interested in seeing how we can get more buy-in from regional parts of Australia and Indonesia. And I know that Katalis is going to be doing a lot of work to reach out and in fact have separate events with various different parts of Indonesia to make sure that we can spread that message as well. Thanks very much, Pat Riandi.
Great, thank you so much for that answer, Todd. So I'm going to ask another question, and this question is from Noka Kiriowan, and the question is directed to Park Toto. So he said, IBC is focusing on nickel-based batteries, but lately graphene has emerged as a commercially viable material to store electricity. Will this be a serious threat to IBC, or will you adopt this technology as well?
Thank you for the question. When we are engaging for the project that we are currently doing, of course, we have done extensive market studies, not just for the current situation, but also for the next 10 or 20 years. And we have firm, I believe also not from the IBC side, but from our more experienced partners such as LG and CATL from China, that for the mass production of electric vehicle, it will be still dependent on the nickel, cobalt, and mangan to some sense, which will, of course, there is a certain amount of lithium that is needed for the batteries. So in terms of graphene, it is a new technology, emerging technology. One thing that is, I think, in terms of economic, it's still quite expensive. If not mistaken, the cost per kilo of graphene is close to about 300, 400,000 US at this point in time. So there is that kind of restriction also. Chemically, it's will have better performance, but in terms of what is commercially viable and what is still in the future, foreseen future for the EV technology, we are still based on the NCM, which is the nickel, cobalt, mangan technology. A little bit technical side, but we still see the future potential for nickel-based and also lithium-based batteries will be driving the EV for the next decades.
Great,
Thank you.
Over to you, Randy.
Yeah, thank you, Clarice. Thank you, Pak Toto, for the answer given. The next question is from Pak Muhammad Faisal. He's from Core Indonesia and one of the Australia Award alumnus. He asked that there is a massive increase in unemployment is one of the major adverse impact of COVID-19 pandemic. And the Indonesian government has implemented several programs aiming at improving manpower skills to address the problem. How does the vocational training programs under IA-CEPA come into the picture? And what has been done to respond to the problem? I would like to maybe invite Bu Winnie if she's still here. If not, then maybe Pak Andrew can answer as well.
Good. Riandi, can you just put the last part of the question again? I got the first part, but not the last part.
All right, the last part is basically saying that how does the vocational training program under IA-CEPA come into the picture of this unemployment impact of COVID-19 pandemic, and what has been done to respond to the problem?
Well, I guess generally I would say that skills are an important part for people finding work, especially in emerging or rapidly growing sectors of the economy. And we know that there's some sectors of the economy in Indonesia and indeed everywhere in the world that are starved for skills. Indonesia is looking to do a lot of work in the infrastructure space, so skills leading into that will be very important. On the other hand, it's also important to acknowledge that education alone or building skills alone isn't the only thing that's involved here. There also has to be wider macroeconomic factors going on that make it possible for firms to be growing. And Todd may want to come in on that, I'm not sure. But I would say one part of the agenda is a skilled workforce that's able to respond to growing areas of demand for specialist labour.
Thank you, Pak Andrew. Maybe Bu Widya also would like to comment on that, since it is also related to the skills development.
Sure, thank you, Mas Riandi. Thank you for the questions. Yes, for a company like Traveloka, definitely vocational skill development skill will be one of the main thing that we would like to explore. And I know that this is not like what you may call it, like kind of solution, direct solution at this moment after pandemic. However, with the post-pandemic, we have to be able to be creative and we have to be able to provide more skills that will be absorbed by 21st job market. And we believe that working together with education institutions to provide curriculum and training practices that is actually more practical will be best. And that's where a company like Traveloka will support. I hope it answered the questions, Mas Riandi. Over to you.
Thank you, Bu Widya, for an answer. Maybe the last one, I will invite Susan to comment on this question. Probably how does this IA-CEPA fit into the picture of skill development program, especially in your sector, in agriculture sectors?
In terms of this, in agriculture, I think that there's a lot of benefits that can be gained with having cooperative agreements between countries, and especially in agriculture, because I think there's a lot of information that can be shared back and forward about different ways of doing things in different climates with different varieties. And so I think there's a great opportunity for more partnerships in this area where we can have partnerships between growers and grower packers, like in all the different aspects of what we do. I think there should be opportunities to make it a lot easier to form partnerships where there can be some sort of not only training but a lot of mutual exchange of information as well. I'm not sure if that quite answers what you're looking for.
Yes, excellent, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. So we have really run over time, and I'm going to say that brings us to the end of the discussion today. So we thank our panelists for a fruitful dialogue, and we hope our viewers have enjoyed the conversation. I'm really sorry that we didn't get to every single question in the Q&A chat. They just keep coming in, but we'll endeavour to provide some answers to those, perhaps in our follow-up emails to you all. So we would like to invite you to keep up to date with news and developments on the Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement by subscribing to our newsletter at IA-CEPA-catalyse.org. We're also on social media at catalyse_IA on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and we're IA-CEPA ECP Catalyst on LinkedIn.
Iya nih, betul Mbak Clarice. Sayang sekali kita harus mengakhiri diskusi di saat yang sedang hangat karena keterbatasan waktu. Kami menyampaikan terima kasih kepada para panelis, kepada para peserta yang bergabung secara online. Terima kasih atas partisipasi Anda dan seluruh pertanyaannya. Mohon maaf jika tidak semua pertanyaan bisa kami jawab karena keterbatasan waktu. Semoga Anda semua menikmati dialog tadi. Dan untuk mengikuti perkembangan terakhir seputar Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, silakan berlangganan di newsletter kami, buka website kami di ia-cepa-catalyse.org, dan juga follow media sosial kami @catalyse_ia di Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, dan juga di LinkedIn, follow kami di IA-CEPA ECP Katalis. Nah, sebelum berpisah, izinkan kami untuk memutarkan video perkenalan mengenai Katalis, dan sampai di sini dulu perjumpaan kita saat ini. Terima kasih dan sampai jumpa di acara Katalis berikutnya.
Before we go, we'd like to show you a short introductory video about Katalis, so you're welcome to stay and watch that if you'd like to. Thank you and see you at the next event.
Thank you. Bye-bye.